Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Split, the young adult book review podcast for readers and writers. I'm Brian Cohen, the author of the Ted Saves the World series. That's Robert Scanlon, the author of the Dreamer Chronicles. And we're excited to be here for episode, I don't even know what episode it is, 23? Is that right?
Yeah. How y'all doing down there?
How y'all doing there in Gatlin? No, that's North Carolina.
I've got no idea. I got no idea.
Gatlin, it's like I'll get into it when I'm talking when I'm doing the voice. Ethan White and Lena Duchesne. No, that's still not working. Okay. I'll get it though.
It'll be obvious to the listeners. Probably.
Yeah, they're gonna get just weirded out because they haven't even said that we're doing Beautiful Creatures by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll today, which is set in Gatlin, South Carolina. And I went to college in the South, so it's exciting to talk about something set in the South. But before we get into that, Robert, you've got kind of new digs back there, some nice trees. I see some foliage outside. That's very natural. I don't know what any of that looks like after 4 months of Chicago winter.
I should describe that for people who are on the podcast only, huh? So
yeah, it's green.
It's green. It's sunny.
It's there's light reflecting off it, and it looks really great. Lots of leafy goodness out there.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to live in a large wooden chalet-style house, which is kind of plonked in the middle of some rainforest, and yeah, it's beautiful. You get these lovely birds calling. You hear kookaburras. If you've ever heard a kookaburra call, we had a visitor from Europe who came once, and the kookaburras were going off outside, and the visitor said, "Are there monkeys in the garden?" Because they just laugh and laugh and laugh. The kookaburras, they're fantastic. So if we get them going off in the garden while we're underweight, Brian, I'll stop so we can listen.
One might even call the kookaburras beautiful creatures.
Ah, one might. But just before we move into beautiful creatures, how's spring?
I'll let you know when it happens. We had a few days of it, but spring usually lasts about 3 weeks in Chicago, so we have to catch it. There was a 60-degree day the other day.
Oh, nice.
And the next soccer season, I play soccer all year round, and the next soccer season's outdoors, so I'm a happy camper. That'll be in a couple of weeks.
And all the beautiful creatures will be outdoors. There you go. I'll give you a segue
Beautiful
back again.
Creatures. Well, there's my segue back. So we're going to talk about beautiful creatures today. We'll do the usual summary, reader perspective, writer perspective, takeaways, and the prompt of the week. Are you ready for some good old-fashioned down country beautiful creatures?
I haven't got a hope.
There we go. I finally got it. That's actually a South Carolina.
I'd love to have heard this on audiobook. It'd be fantastic. Yes, Brian, I'm ready.
Oh, you should.
Take it away.
You should. All right. Ethan Waite's only escape from the oppressively normal life of Gatlin, South Carolina, has been the haunting girl from his dreams. Or are they nightmares? Regardless, Ethan's normalcy is lost for good when Lena Duchesne, the actual girl from his dreams, comes to town. As the two of them fall for each other, Ethan must help Lena cope with a horrible curse that could count down the days until she's lost to the darkness. Can love conquer all when magic and evil are conspiring to destroy it? So, this was the longest book we've read, I'm pretty sure. And so, yeah, oh yeah. And so I'm inclined to say, because of that, that Beautiful Creatures was over long, but I also really liked a lot of the backstory, and I liked the growing affection between Ethan and Lena. So I liked it, but the jury's out on the length. What do you think?
Yeah, I heard the audiobook version was 17 hours or something, so you must have been up all night listening to that thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it took some reading to get that done in a week, I can tell you. And fortunately, I loved it. I'd agree with you in terms of the jury's out on the length. If you read some of the reviews, you do get a little bit of people saying, yeah, it was a little slow and there were some things that were kind of repeated a lot. But I really liked it. What did you think?
I liked it. I think that it. I mean, there's a lot of great mythology set up, and I like mythology. I think like it's a slow and steady build. It keeps you guessing. You know, the mystery aspect, as we've talked of before. Every genre is mystery. If it wants to be interesting throughout, and I had no idea what was going to happen. Like, there were surprises. You didn't see everything coming, so that kept me in. I like the characters here. And I mean, Gatlin itself was a real character. The city, the town of Gatlin, South Carolina, including its Civil War origin. I think there was some great depth here. The accents had me wanting to talk like Frank Underwood from House of Cards, and it was just a lot of fun to listen to that. And I think that it was a good story. It was definitely a good story, and I did enjoy it.
Indeed. And I should also point out that this is probably okay for younger readers. There's some kissing, and it's obviously a romance. Lena Duchesne is the object of Ethan's affection. And I heard also that the character Ethan is done really, really well in the audiobook. A lot of people were raving about Ethan. So I think...
Yeah, he is.
I'm starting to understand a little bit more about the difference between just reading something and then listening to it. So maybe one day you should task me to do a listen to something instead of reading. And
see, the audio for this, the character did really well. They went a little wonky with the audio effects on this one. I gotta tell you, when there was rain in a scene, they went to town with the rain, and I was like, okay, that's a lot. And sometimes the rain would be going on for like 15 minutes, so that you'd hear the loop. You'd hear when the rain looped, and it was like, it takes me out a little bit.
Yeah.
But hey. Yeah. It's what they wanted to try, so let them give it a shot.
And to be fair to the authors, they probably weren't at all in control of that. So,
I'm certain. I'm certain.
But I really liked some of the supporting characters as well, and with one exception, actually. I think Ethan's dad just should have been written out. He's like,
that was odd. Maybe there's something coming with that in later books.
That's true. Yeah, you're probably right.
But definitely in this book, he seems like kind of pointless. Maybe he should have been a deadbeat dad who didn't live there anymore, versus being this constant weird thing in the background.
This guy cooped up in his bedroom in his pajamas, madly trying
in his pajamas. Yeah.
Where did that come from? But I really liked Link. I thought Link was fantastic.
Link was a great character.
Yeah. And so for those who haven't read the book, Link is kind of Ethan's best friend, but he's really torn because this girl, Lena Duchesne, comes into town, and she is the outcast. People are suspicious of her from it's the deep South suspicion, and she's a stranger in town. She upsets the natural order, and she's also striking, but in an unusual way. Can I just read? Because I really thought that some of the writing in this was fantastic, and so it's rare that I bookmark and highlight fiction. Really, really rare. And this was a book. This was a book where I've got probably 10 highlights because I just love the writing so much. And I'm still speaking from a reader's perspective. So I just love this one. She tucked her dark curls behind her ear, black nail polish catching the fluorescent light. Her hands were covered with black ink, like she had written on them. She walked down the hall as if we were invisible. She had the greenest eyes I'd ever seen, so green they could have been considered some new colour altogether. Yeah, she's hot, said Billy. I knew what they were thinking. For a second, they were thinking about dumping their girlfriends for the chance to hit on her. For a second, she was a possibility. I just thought it was really tastefully written, And
there's passages like that throughout the book.
Throughout the whole book.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons it's 150,000 words, but it's also a reason why I think writers looking to write description, that because you learn so much from that description. Yes. I think this is a good book to check out.
Yeah, and like you say, the mythology is excellent because there's some deep, dark stuff that goes way, way, way back, and humans with powers. There's witchery, so it's not your standard vampire, werewolf type of thing. The witchery is really nicely done. I like the different types of powers. And I can't remember the name of Lena's uncle now, but who she comes to stay with. But the house is that he's in just changes every time.
I don't know, like Roland or something.
I
It's not that, but it's
I can't remember.
yeah.
It was a long book.
It was a long book, and we've read 2 books since that. Yes, I agree. I think that the supporting cast and the way that the witches were handled was definitely very cool. But we're getting into some writer stuff. You ready to talk writer?
Yeah, I think we could probably move into writers. Yeah, one more thing as well. This is interesting. This book was written in 2009.
Yeah,
and it has the line from Shakespeare that contains The Fault in Our Stars. And isn't it interesting that in 2012, The Fault in Our Stars came out, and this book could actually have ended up being called that. So
I know.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, I mean, it just shows how one piece of literature that can inspire one person can inspire multiple people.
Indeed. Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It was
Shakespeare.
Pretty inspirational.
What a guy. Or multiple guys.
That's right. And look, some of that's young adult, so maybe we can review Romeo and Juliet one day.
Oh yeah. I at one point knew the balcony speech.
Whoa. Okay. Well, then we can do a special excerpt from Bryan.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
What's
So what did we think from a writer's perspective then?
It's a book that is big, and there's a lot of exposition, and a lot of it's needed. I think Garcia and Stoll do a good job of spreading out that exposition, because you're still learning things towards the end, the mystery thing. Some of those scenes are a little like there's a scene where they were in the library and the uncle shows up and the nanny, they show up, and I'm like, it's a little much. But that only happened once, and most of it I was very interested to keep learning things, and I feel like the future books, there's probably going to be more things to learn even further down the line.
And you've talked before about this idea that we're transported somewhere. And although you're not transported into a fantasy world, you're transported into Gatlin. And I love the fact that not everything is quite as it seems in Gatlin. And you gradually uncover this bit by bit throughout the book. So although there's a lot of people in the reviews complained about the repetitive nature of, Lena's kind of whining about, does she really want to be claimed? And, she's going to be the dark side. She knows she's going to be claimed to the dark side. She knows it's going to happen, and she keeps talking about it. And it does take us quite a long while to find out, but that's the whole point. It's one of the major goals of the character for the book. So I think that's pretty cool. But the fact that it evolves through this discovery of more about Gatlin, I like the supporting cast with all their typical small town petty politics. It was just wonderful, and for an Australian and for anyone who comes from outside the South. I mean, I've only ever been to Atlanta, so I've got no idea, but I can imagine. So I was really transported both into this sort of southern, tightly knit, close atmosphere, and then into this gradually unfolding layers of what was an alternative history for the place. Very clever.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And the South thing, like, this isn't the first book where there's an outsider going against convention and being an outcast.
Yeah.
But the Southern setting, I think, really helps it to show that it's different. It makes it a different story, because you've got the town politics, you've got the Southern accents, you've got all of that stuff, and it's really making it its own thing. I mean, it's Romeo and Juliet, it's Gatlin, South Carolina, it's witches, and when you mix together different elements, you get something different. You get a new story, and so Garcia and Stoll created their own thing here by mixing elements that have been seen before into something that hasn't been seen before.
Now, you're a guy and I'm a guy. I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Correct.
You listened to the audio, and that may have made a difference. What was your impression of Ethan?
Hmm. I think that they did a pretty clear job in the beginning that he kind of wanted out of things, and then when Lena came, she was kind of his life raft, and he jumped out on it.
True.
And he was, you know, from there on, like a pretty good guy to her, and I don't know, maybe he was a little too heroic too quickly, but I think that generally I believed the character of
Character, yes.
Ethan.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well,
What did you think?
yeah, I mean, obviously, I asked that question because I'm a little torn, and I suspected that it would probably easily overcome on the audio with good casting, but
Mm,
in the text, there were times where I found him slightly unbelievable from a point of view of a male, and I thought,
mm,
oh, he reads. He reads like if I put a female name in here, would I believe that more? There were only occasions where it was, you know, maybe a scene, and when we went into his head, the way he was thinking, and of course, how would I know? I'm not female, but the way he was
yeah.
thinking didn't seem to me to be what a kind of a guy who, I mean, he is sporty. You know, he's not a jock, but
Hmm.
he's sporty. He's not an outcast himself at school until he decides to hook up with Lena.
Yeah.
So he's, you know, he should be a kind of normal, kind of 15, 16-year-old kid. And yeah, I thought, is he a bit female? And so after I'd read the book, I, as normal, go and look at the reviews, and I actually found quite a number of people who said exactly the same thing, that they found
Hmm.
Ethan not a believable male because he seemed too female. So I suspected that
Interesting.
when I read a comment that said about the audiobook that he was so well cast and well done, I thought, I bet that's masked because, you know, it's a lot of that is intonation. So maybe if they'd had someone like me reread some of the paragraphs and offer them feedback, a change of a word or two, maybe leaving out a sentence.
Hmm.
Guys don't explain stuff so much. You know, they go into the cave, and he
Yeah.
explained a lot in his head, which was interesting, but
Yeah.
not necessarily a typical young boy's world.
Huh, that is so interesting, and I think that that's why it's always a good idea to consult a member of the opposite sex. My my editor for Ted Saves the World is female, and several of my beta readers are female, and so I've been told things like, no, a person wouldn't think that, a person wouldn't do that, and so that has helped me considerably. So maybe that went through an entire female editing team, and maybe nobody picked up on those things. That's very interesting, and I think that's smart for writers to keep in mind.
Yeah, and yet there are other lines that are really well done. So,
Yeah.
um, sorry, I'm just moving away from the microphone there. Let me just get this one because it's quite clever. Um,
Mm.
it's something about guys, and yeah, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Right, so that's a cliche phrase, but then about 3 paragraphs later, he ends up. This is Ethan to speaking. He ends up at, and I think it's the end of a chapter, and it's a great ending line. Guys don't talk about stuff like that. We just lie under the pile of bricks.
Mm.
So I really like that. You know, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and then it goes through the stuff, and you're in his
And
head,
then they lie under
and
the
then
bricks.
yeah, and there are lines like that which are very guy. Like it's a very guy thing.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, guys don't talk about stuff like that. I think that was, you know, a male starting to realize that, hey, I'm trapped in this small town thing, and not only that, you know, wow, guys don't talk about stuff like this. So it's a good,
Hmm.
maybe a slightly coming of age thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good thought on that because I mean, everyone's going to find issues with any book.
Yeah, of course.
And well, especially when it's a longer one like this.
Yes.
And I think that when you have enough lines that make sense, like you said, that's a very guy thing.
Yeah.
Guys just lay under the bricks. Then you have this opportunity for people to see that, like, yeah, maybe this isn't quite right, but there's enough that is, and you're
Yeah.
set. So
Yeah.
just another argument against perfection.
Yeah, well, look, and I'd still say this is one of the best books I've read this year. You know,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it for the craft that went into it. There's some beautiful lines and great description, and okay, yeah,
Hmm.
it may be a tad long, and But
Mm-hmm.
as you say, there are things that still surprise you even at the end. So it's kind of cool and surprise you in a good way, not the sort of, the and then suddenly someone we've never seen before came in and rescued them. That doesn't happen yet.
Yes.
Everything is foreshadow, which is skillful in a long book.
Yeah. Oh,
But
certainly.
spoiler alert, there is a point of view change, isn't there?
Yeah, I have that as one of my last writer perspective things.
Take it away.
For one chapter, we change for a reason, and there's a
Yes.
very distinct reason why this happens. But for one chapter and one chapter alone, we shift from Ethan's perspective to Lena's, and I think that's a risk when you do that. And I mean, in the audio, it went from a guy voice to a female voice,
Yes.
and it makes me wonder if later books are going to be more from Lena's perspective than just this one.
Good point.
But yeah, really interesting, and I think it paid off. It worked.
Yes.
It worked well in here, and I definitely didn't. I didn't have a problem with it, but I'm sure some readers might. And if that's their thing, that's fine. But I wasn't too shaken by it. I mean, I write books in like 5 or 6 different perspectives,
Yes.
so
Yes.
for me, it wasn't such a big deal. Did you feel as though it was warranted, earned, et cetera, et cetera?
You're right about the flagging what could be coming in later books. That's very true. And so that's smart because you don't want to have the readers going into some of the other books and then thinking, hang on a minute, who's this character? So, we've already had that point of view. So that's, you're right. That's clever. It was mildly jarring.
It was.
And it was perfectly written. I didn't have any issue with the point of views sounded different. So that was why it was jarring, because this is pretty close to the end, and so through the whole book, when you read a book like that, you are Ethan. You're channeling the inner Ethan, and then all of a sudden you're not, because it's it's first person past, isn't it? Seem to
I
remember.
believe so.
Yeah.
So
you really you're in Ethan's head so much. And because, as I say, he explains a lot of what's going on in his head. So that was the only thing that just, it took me out of the story a little, and it was really nicely done. I would question whether it was necessary, but having heard your masterful interpretation of this is something that's probably coming in future books, I think you're right. That was for sure pretty clever.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the pattern that I'm picking up on, even though I haven't read any of the second books.
Yes,
pretty much.
There's a movie, isn't there, of this?
There is, and they made some interesting plot changes. We'll have to talk about it off the air.
Yeah,
but they almost made it. They almost took out the sequel capability, which seems strange for a Hollywood movie. And it was actually semi-well reviewed on the bad end.
Yeah.
Because some of those books, when they're adapted, get reviewed on like Rotten Tomatoes, they're at 5%.
Yeah.
But this one was in the 40s.
Oh, okay.
So not terrible, but we'll talk about it, definitely.
Cool.
I'd love to give a takeaway.
I think we should get into takeaways, yeah. Our takeaways are famous.
Famous. Yeah. That's how we have it in our outlines.
That's right. So what's the first famous takeaway, Brian?
Our first famous takeaway is set your book somewhere different to spice up a typical story. Gatlin, South Carolina is different. How many books do you know that are set in New York, L.A., Chicago?
Yeah.
But Gatlin, South Carolina, not many. So if you have knowledge of a place or you want to transport readers to a place, it doesn't have to be somewhere magical. It can be somewhere different, interesting, and not typically set in. So that's one great way to set your book apart.
Nicely said. It's a character in and of itself, isn't it, the town? There's no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
Where my takeaway is for both readers and writers. And normally I sort of try and make it sort of apply to both, but I think this is really especially true for writers. Anyone who's interested in the YA young adult genre, I think should read this book, because it's not got the mass market stamp on it. And maybe, that's a problem. that's more literary in some senses in its writing style. But if you want to see how good characters are well drawn, minor comments about Ethan's gender stereotyping aside, he's still a really well drawn, really well written character. And Link is fantastic. And some of the supporting kind of snarky beauty queen, southern, petty-minded girls in the school are just just hilarious. And so rather than that sort of shallow divergent style characters, I think this was really well done and an example of a great collaboration between writers. So kudos to them. I read it and it made me sad about my own writing, thinking, oh, could I ever write anything like this? This is really well done. And apparently they banged the first draft out in 3 months. So,
that's amazing.
Which is pretty good. I mean, look, anyone can churn out a first draft fast. I mean, that's not the point.
Yeah.
I do think it's a great young adult read. It's different. It's not necessarily as fast-paced action, boy meets girl, they instantly fall in love and then they're ripped apart. It's not one of those. No. But there is a great love story in it and there's some nice magic. But for me, it was the relationships between the characters that I just thought was so beautifully done, and the way that they got outcast in school. Anyway, that's a long takeaway, isn't it? But if you're into young adult, and especially if you're a young adult writer, I think you should read this for inspiration.
Yeah, my third takeaway will be much shorter, but that was a good takeaway. My third takeaway is tell the story you want to tell, no matter how long it is. They had a story in mind. They stuck to their guns, 150,000 words. They did it. If you have a story that's 20,000 words, tell it in 20. Do it how you want to do it. Do it what feels natural. Don't feel constrained that you have to go longer or shorter. Tell your story, and then you'll see where it ends up.
Bryan Cohen, telling you how it should be.
Telling you how it should be.
Yeah, totally agree, though. Totally agree.
Thank you. Good.
And I think actually that's very relevant to today's self-publishing world, isn't it, or independent publishing world, because a lot of people may not know this, but a lot of genre fiction is dictated by how many pages the paperback should be and how many they could put on a shelf.
Yeah.
And how much the publisher wanted to charge. So, for some of these fantasy epics, they're great books, but the reason that publishers in the early days wanted very thick books is so they could find ways to charge more. And there you go. Now,
Robert telling it like it is.
Do you have a prompt for us, Bryan? I think we better finish this show.
Prompt of the week. You've been told by a mystical force that you'll turn good or evil on your 16th birthday. How would this change how you lead your life up till the big day? Would you try to stop your fate? Why or why not?
Well, there you go.
So basically the plot of Beautiful Creatures, but, apply it to your own life and you'll get something different, because if you mix two things together that are different than the source materials, you will churn out something different.
Yep. And if your 16th birthday was several decades ago,
then you pretend. Jeez, I mean, come on.
Which did you choose? Is he dark or is he light?
Dark? Well, we know with both of us. You actually have the light shining on you.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. For those watching on YouTube, you can see the beautiful Australian morning sunshine. We'd love to hear from listeners and viewers. We're getting some really good feedback, aren't we, Bryan, at the moment? It's really nice that we're getting emails, we're getting comments. So if you're listening to this now and you haven't read Beautiful Creatures, go read it, come back in 3 years and leave a comment. It's a long book. So, Bryan, lead us off with your call to action.
Well, thank you guys for listening. Please respond to the prompt of the week at the comments at thesplitbookreviews.com. Leave us a review on iTunes, because then people will know when they check this show out on iTunes that we are the quality you believe we are. And you should come back next week, because we've got Matched by Ali Condi, and that's going to get some interesting discussion going, I'm sure. And it was shorter, so, I'm inclined to like it better. No, just kidding. But it's great to have you listeners out there For Robert Scanlon of the Dreamer Chronicles, I'm Brian Cohen of Ted Saves the World. Come back next week, check us out, and go out there and find some beautiful creatures of your own.
Yes, stay in the light, people.
Thank you guys for watching. Somewhere on this page is a subscribe button to the Split channel. We do reviews every week. We would love it if you followed us every single week. Isn't that right, Robert?
That's exactly right. Follow us now. Hit the subscribe button.
Do it.